Welcome to update number 9. Here I have the center section together for the mock-up, and I've made a few changes with this airliner. Light is the word, so I'm trying to do all I can to save all the weight that I possibly can. And here you can see I have the nose section taped to the center section and the tail section taped to the center section. So this is in fact the total size. It's 9 foot long, so it's a pretty good size fuselage. The stringers, I was going to use a lot of wood. Actually, I was going to use wood in all of these places, but I've given it some more thought, and I'm going to replace the wood with the stringers that you see. Still going to have some wood here and here and in the center and in the same place on the other side. Mainly because that's where the doors are going to go down in this area. That's why I want to keep the wood. So where the doors are down here, I want to keep the structure. Also, I need some support other than the sheeting, and actually the sheeting is going to do about 80% of the work as far as structure wise. And because of that, you can see that I have a bunch of holes in my foam stringers. And the reason for these holes is because that's going to ensure that the stringer gets mounted to the sheeting, and also the stringer, the way it's set up, it actually grabs the bulkhead, so it's not going to shift back and forth once the sheeting is glued to it. So hopefully it'll give me a solid, strong structure, but also keep it light. And here we're going to look from the underside. You can see that I'm using a pull cable for the steering. This is actually going to be embedded in the nose section right along in here. The gear retracts up pretty slowly. And it locks. And then down. And then lock. Here's a closer look at the retracts, and they are from Robart, and they are the servoless simple mount, plywood mount that was actually machined and holes drilled and a pocket drilled or machined out for the servo, and then 2 blocks that were drilled out for spacers. Now, I could use some spacers in here, but I think I'll just stick with the blocks. Maybe I'll drill a hole in the blocks or something to lighten it up just a little bit. But at any rate, here you can see the mock-up of the retract, and we operate the gear. This is forward, by the way, so the nose gear is going to move forward when it retracts, just like it would in the full-size model. And we have absolutely no play between the wheel and the servo, but cables are just taut, and they're not binding on the locking mechanism of the servo. So they're about as tight as you want them, but after it cycles a few times and gets a few flights on it, the cables will tend to stretch a little bit, so it should wind up being perfect. And these cables are actually riding on bearings on this end. So there's a bearing under here and a bearing under that cable. It's just basically wrapped around the bearing, and then there's a piece of tubing that's crimped, much like you see the tubing down here. That tubing is crimped, and then there's a piece of shrink wrap going over it. Also on this end here, the cable is crimped inside the brass tubing, but then also the brass tubing allows me to adjust the cable in and out of the connector. It's a simple way to do it, and it does give you a little bit of adjustment, but you still have to get them pretty close. And you can see here, this is on a bearing. This cable is on a bearing. So there's update number 9 with reference to the gear mechanism, the retract unit ready to be mounted, and the fuselage mocked up so you can see the full size. That table that it's sitting on is 2 foot by 8 foot. So it's hanging over about 6 inches, 5 inches on this side, and about 7, 8 inches on that side. Well, actually it's a foot total because it's a 9 foot fuselage on an 8 foot table.
I wanted to clarify a couple of things with regards to the images and the video in this update. First off, if you paid real close attention to the video, you'll notice that I have done away with the plywood bulkheads on the front and the back ends of the center section. Whenever I showed the mock-up of the foam nose on the front and the foam tail on the rear. The reason for that is to save weight, and I've come up with a way in order to do that and still maintain the integrity of the seam between the nose cone, the center section, and the tail cone in the center section. And the way I'm going to do that is simply I'm going to have the sheeting run up into the foam 1 inch. So what I'll do is I'll take the foam plugs as we have them now, the nose cone and the tail cone, and I will carve 1 inch off of the mating surface, 1/4 of an inch deep, and then the sheeting will run from that line, which will be 1 inch onto the nose cone and 1 inch onto the tail cone, and that should give me a good solid seam between the center section and the nose cone, or the center section and the tail cone. The other thing I wanted to point out was that you see in some of the stringers in the video, some of the stringers had gaps, and that was simply because the foam section was actually trying to pull the center section apart because there was no glue on anything. Everything was just a friction fit. So once it's glued up, all the seams will be butted together, and everything will fit tight, and if it does, then I'll wind up with a true round square fuselage. And that was the whole idea behind cutting the stringers on the CNC machine, so that it ensured that all the bulkheads wound up in the right places. But anyway, wanted to clarify those two things. Look forward to the next update in approximately 7 to 10 days.